Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to a new video. Hope you are all well. In this video, we are going to show you how to fix no video output issues on an Xbox Series S when you know that the HDMI port is actually working, or you've actually already replaced the HDMI port and it still hasn't fixed your issue. So this video is going to look at replacing an IC on the actual motherboard of the Xbox Series S, which could resolve your issues. So first things to remember, doing this will obviously invalidate your warranty. So only do this if your Xbox Series S is out of warranty. And we need to remove the case first of all. So on the rear of the console, there are two, just spin it around. There are two little white plastic tabs here, which are basically just stickers, which you need to take off. Behind those are some screws. So grab yourself a pair of tweezers or a little flat blade screwdriver and just carefully pry off those little stickers like so. One that side, and then one this side, like so. And then behind there, as you can see, there's a couple of screws which need to come out. So the screwdriver bit you need is a T9 for these. So it's like the star 9. Off they come. Like so. Now turn the console upside down and this bottom panel now just slides backwards like so, and then you can lift the bottom panel away to get access to all the other screws. Now as we are taking the motherboard out to replace the HDMI redriver chip, we actually do need to remove all of these screws. The green screws, they hold the actual white plastic case onto the metal frame. All the silver screws hold all the peripherals like the power supply onto the metal frame. And these black screws hold the heatsink again onto the metal frame. But we need to remove all of them because we are removing the motherboard. So let's do that now. So with all the screws removed, we now need to remove the white plastic casing. Now to do this, we need to flip the console back over again. But while we're around this way, just keep an eye on these two plastic lugs here on the sides. Be careful not to catch these when you're taking the top case off because they are quite fragile and they can break. So flip the console over. Easiest way I found to do this is you literally gently pull outwards like so at the rear here like this, and then the casing will literally slide off. But again, just be careful of these plastic lugs which the casing screws go into. Make sure you don't catch those as you lift that off. Okay, then on top we've got this RF shield. Got a load of dust in this one. Let me just give it a quick clean up. Right, that's the dust removed. Sorry about that. That was a quite dusty console. So as I was saying, we need to now remove the RF shield at the top here, and that literally just wiggles. Give it a bit of a wiggle and it will pop off like so. Then we're obviously getting into the console a bit more. On the front here, we have the controller Wi-Fi and sync button board, as well as the controller Wi-Fi. On the right hand side here, we have the power button board, and then to the side, we have the actual Wi-Fi, the network Wi-Fi card. All of those three need to come off for us to be able to take the motherboard out. On each of them, there's a black screw on this, the sync button board. There's 3 screws. On the power, there's just the 1, and there's another 3 on the side here. So just undo all of those screws. And then to remove these boards, you literally just gently pull them towards you. So pull them upwards like so, and they pop off. There's a connector like that. It just pops off the connector. So we'll put those to one side. Be careful of the power one because it's quite small. Give it a bit of a wiggle and off it will come. And then the same for the Wi-Fi board as well. Pull that towards you and off it pops. Okay, so now we can start removing the fan and the power supply. The fan comes off. The first thing to do though is actually just remove the power supply. That literally just lifts upwards. So if you support the console with one hand, pull up the power supply and away it comes like so. Again, quite a bit of dust inside this console. And then the fan itself, there is actually a power cable there, just connected onto the motherboard. So be careful of that. Now, to take this the power cable out, make sure you actually grab the plug, not the cables. Give it a bit of a wiggle. If you do have any trouble removing it, you can get a pair of pliers. And again, making sure that you are connecting your pliers to the actual plug and not the cables. A very gentle wiggle as you're putting it upwards. And loosen it off. And then off it comes, just like so. And then the fan can come off. Next up, there's a very small RF shield here, just above the front USB port, which needs to come off. Do so by just lifting that up and off it will pop like so. And then we will be able to remove the motherboard. Now the way I do it is just gently lift up from the USB port, not too much pressure, and then you've got space to put your hand in there, lift up by the heatsink, and then out the motherboard will come like so. And then we need to remove the heatsink. Way to do that, flip it over, and then we need to remove this X clamp. Now there are some tools on the market that you can get to remove the X clamp. Personally, I don't think they're much cop. I've tried using them a few times, and to me they just are causing more damage to the motherboard than it's actually worth. So the way I do it is get a flat blade screwdriver and then very gently find a nice gap at the end of the X clamp, and then just very slowly, no pressure at all, just lift the X clamp off from one side. As soon as you remove one leg, the others will start coming as well. So again, just very gently. I'm putting no pressure on that at all, as you can see. Off that pops, and then we just go around. As I say, once you've done one side, it all starts coming off really easily. And then just lift off the X clamp like so. So obviously there's some thermal paste between the heatsink and the actual APU. So what I do is just gently push down on the motherboard with the heatsink this way, and then the heatsink will lift off. And you've got the old thermal paste, which we'll replace a little bit later. So let's just cut in there. So that previous footage was from a video of me replacing the HDMI port on an Xbox Series S. And it just shows you of how to dismantle the Xbox Series S. So I didn't want to re-record all of that just for this video. But essentially what we're going to focus our efforts on in this video is this tiny little IC just here. Let me just zoom in a little bit so you can see that for yourselves. As you can see, we have got the HDMI ports here, and then there's an IC just here, which we're going to look at replacing. Now this essentially is the HDMI redriver chip on the Xbox Series S, as well as the Xbox Series X. Microsoft have actually gone to another supplier for the redriver IC. This one is actually an OnSemi, and it's actually an NB7NQ621M. That's the actual model number of that IC. And it obviously replaces the older redriver chips that you saw on the old Xbox One X and the Xbox One S models. This time, this actual IC is the same on the Series S and the Series X, which is handy. This motherboard has got no video output at all. I've checked the HDMI ports. I know it's working perfectly fine. I've checked the filters. I've checked the ESD chip. That's fine. So what I'm going to try and do is get this Redriver IC replaced, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So let's get under the microscope and we'll show you how to do that. Right, so here we are underneath the microscope. What you can see up here is the HDMI port. Then you've got the ESD chip, and here is the Redriver IC. So as I say, this is the NB7N621M from OnSemi, or OnSemi, not too sure how to pronounce that. And essentially this does exactly the same job as the old 75DP159s on the Xbox One S, for example. Takes all the signals from the APU, make sure they're all aligned and all timed up correctly, and then pushes them out via these filters out through to your HDMI port. So this is it's actually an X2 QFN38 package, and this is an 11x8, so 11 pins down either the long sides and 8 pins across the short side layout. I can't actually find a data sheet for these, but these ICs do seem to be available. Obviously, if you know where to look, I'll leave a link in the description below to where you can source these ICs. Right, so let's get this replaced. Now, easiest way to do this is, first of all, let's apply some flux to the area, which will help the leaded solder melt. And what we're going to do, we're going to come in with our heat gun, and we are going to heat up the entire area and then remove the faulty IC. So my heat gun is on 480 degrees with an airflow of 75%. And then I'm just going to come in and heat up the entire area. Okay, so I'm not, if you like, zooming in with the heat straight onto the IC. I'm coming around and heating up the whole area of the motherboard. Get some nice heat in there all the way around it, because it's key to heat up the motherboard as well as heating up the IC itself. And then eventually what you'll see is the solder goes silver looking, almost, well, it looks like it's melting. And then when you think it's ready, you come in with a pair of tweezers and then literally just pull the IC away like so. Now, while the motherboard is still warm, we're going to come in with some solder wick, and we're just going to remove any of that excess leaded solder. Like so. Let's just give it a little bit of flux as well to help that leaded solder pull onto the copper wick. Like so. And then we're going to come in with our IPA, or isopropyl alcohol, and give the whole area a good clean up. Okay, now what you can see is the pads are nice and clean, all ready to accept our replacement IC. Now this method is my preferred method of resoldering the new IC. Now some people will come in with some unleaded solder and add that to the motherboard. With that method, what I find tricky sometimes is because you are essentially installing a brand new IC, what you end up having to do is actually tin the pads on these ICs, right? So you imagine this is a brand new IC. All of those pads there don't have any solder on them at all. So I find it a lot quicker and easier to actually use some solder paste. Okay, so what we do, we come in with our solder paste and we just add it along here. So all where the pads are, and it has to be roughly like so. Put a blob in the middle like so, and then come in with our replacement IC. Now obviously noting the dot on the motherboard needs to correspond with the dot on the actual chip as well, so that's the right way around, and we just pop the IC in place like so. So there's the dot there on the motherboard and the dot on the actual IC is just there. So then what I do, I turn the airflow right down on my heat gun to around 50%. I then just very gently rest my tweezers on the IC like so. And then high up, I come in with my heat gun and start to warm the area. And then what you'll see is that solder paste gets to a certain temperature and then actually starts to melt. And you can move your tweezers away, and that solder paste, because it's got flux in it already, will draw itself to the pads and to the IC exactly where it needs to go. Surface tension will really help you out, and all we're doing is just heating the entire area, and when we feel it's ready, what we're going to do is just gently rest our tweezers on the IC, push it down just a little bit, making sure it's in position. Like so, and then pull our heat away. We'll come in with some flux, put it all the way around. And then we're going to come in with our fine tip soldering iron and remove all of the excess solder by simply just running your soldering iron tip across the pads. Spin it around so it's a bit easier to get to. So that is the excess solder removed. We are going to check our alignments. And then we are going to clean the whole area up with some IPA. Now the thing to remember, because you use solder paste and it can run off slightly, is make sure you clean the whole area, okay? Because because if there's any excess solder paste that's run off, it could cause a short circuit. So you need to be mindful of that. And then what I like to do as well is just check all of the components around the actual IC we've just replaced as well, right? So some resistors here, just making sure that the solder paste hasn't bridged any of those, which it hasn't. And again, just down there, just make sure there's a little capacitor there. Make sure none of these pads are bridged. No, they're not. Good. And then as we've cleaned it up, as you can see, the actual pads are all nice and connected. Like so. So there you go, one replaced HDMI redriver on the Xbox Series S. Now I'm going to cut back to a video I recorded previously now on how to reassemble the Xbox Series S. So what we need to do is put some nice new fresh thermal paste on here. So let's clean the old stuff off. So as I say, let's put on our new thermal paste. And pop that into place. Flip the motherboard over. And then we need to pop back on our X-clamp. So the trick on getting these X-clamps back on is loosely just drop it on. Make sure that the holes are above the pins that pop through the motherboard, okay? Give it a bit of a wiggle. If it doesn't move, then it's in place. All right, so gently drop it on. Give it a bit of a wiggle, top to bottom, right to left. Then you know it's kind of roughly in the right place. And then just gently push down. Do not push too hard, very gently, just pop down. Like so. Get our bottom chassis. Again, just double checking that the visco paste is good. Make sure there's no debris in there. Take the motherboard, put it in this way, right? So you put in the ports through the holes at the back first of all and then dropping it down. Make sure the USB port drops into position. I have to end up giving it a bit of a wiggle like that. In it goes, it pops down like so. What you can do now is if you just turn it over and just keep your hand on top of the heatsink, hold it like that, just pop a couple of these black screws in, then it just holds the motherboard in place. Okay, I'll tighten those up in a minute. So now we know the motherboard's in place. Get our fan, make sure it's nice and clean. Goes that way around, obviously, because the cable needs to connect in here. You can do, pop the cable in first, like so, and then position the fan, and it just drops into position, like so. Take the RF gasket from the front that we popped on earlier, like so, so it goes this way round, and put that back into position again. Like so, as you can see there, kind of wraps around, so it kind of goes either side of the chassis on each end, like so. Take a power supply. Obviously, power cable connector goes to the back. It only goes in one way round. Drop your power supply in. The connectors for the power supply there and there, so make sure they're aligned. Just give it a gentle push down, like so. What you can do then, flip it over, And then you can actually start adding the silver screws back in again. Done. All right, now we need to add back on the eject button, board, power board, and the Wi-Fi board as well. Right, now just give everything just a quick visual check, make sure the fan's not moving around, power supply is good, boards are good. And get your RF gasket again. And that literally just pops back over, like so. Grab our top case. Again, just make sure you're careful of these little plastic lugs or holes at the end where the case screws goes into, because you can break them off if you are not too careful. Easiest way to put the case on I've found so far, there might be a better way. Stand the console up on its rear, okay? Grab the case, come in with the case this way. Now drop it down and then locate the USB port so it pops, it's ready to pop through the hole, okay? And then just rest it like so, if it's not on correctly, right? And then with the rear, bend it out slightly over the Wi-Fi card, which is on the right, and then the casing on the left, and then it kind of fits, it kind of goes into the right position roughly, and then just grab the whole console, use the USB port as a locator, give it a bit of a wiggle, and then on the rear, just make sure you pop the casing across the back plastic piece, and then it should fit on nicely. Okay, and you can lay it down. Just quickly check the sync button and the power button's working, and then get your green screws, pop them into the holes, and then tighten them up. And then finally, get your bottom plate. Just getting it around the right way, so obviously the holes for the screws to the back. Pop it on, it just slides in. Get your last two screws, which are your black casing screws. Pop them in. Like so, and then get your little white plastic tabs, pop them back over the screws, like so. So there you go, a video to show you how to replace the OnSemi conductor HDMI Redriver IC on an Xbox Series S. Commonly, this will fix no video output issues on your Xbox Series S where you have already replaced the HDMI port and where you've done some testing to prove that the HDMI port is absolutely fine. As we know, on the Xbox One X and Xbox One S, the redriver or retimer chip on those was a very much of a weak point on them, causing many no video output issues. It certainly has fixed the no video output issue on this Xbox Series S. So, you know, it seems to be we might start having more and more problems with these redriver chips like we did on the older Xbox One models. So thanks very much for watching, really do appreciate your view. Please consider giving us a thumbs up, it really does help us out a lot. And also subscribe to the channel. We are now posting weekly videos every Friday on how to fix Xbox consoles as well as PlayStation consoles as well. including PlayStation 5s, as well as the new Xbox Series S and Xbox Series X. So thanks very much for watching. Take care of yourselves. Bye bye for now.